I would like to see Ubisoft return to the good old days, like the Assassin's Creed 2 days, even like Assassin's Creed 3 back in like 2012. They still were pushing boundaries. They still were trying to do things like bigger and better than anybody had ever seen. I remember the first time I saw the snow deformation tech in Assassin's Creed 3, it broke my brain. Like the idea that you could walk through snow and the snow would deform and leave like a trench where you had walked. It was mind blowing at the time. Now that's just a standard. And like they used to really push the boundaries in terms of tech, in terms of these different ideas. And it's been a long time since they did that. They had some interesting things they tossed out with like, for example, with like Watch Dogs Legion. That entire game is built on a really weird idea, which is just like every NPC you see in the game world, you can recruit and then play as. Everybody's playable and they all have different roles in the story, different backgrounds, different abilities. It's a cool concept. It was kind of like that Jurassic Park thing where they're like, we were so focused on whether we could, nobody asked if we should. It was a similar thing there where they're like, we can do this. Should we? Is it fun? I don't know, but let's do it anyways. You know, it was a cool concept, but it didn't make for a great video game. Like it was a cool tech demo, but it didn't really translate super well for gameplay. But Ubisoft is continuing to try and push the boundaries allegedly. And one of the ways they're doing this is, shocker, with AI powered game characters. Now, this is not the first time we've heard something like this. They've already described how they're trying to use AI tools to help write scripts for like NPCs that you find out in the world. They've said they want to have like AI discussions with characters where you can basically just freely talk to an NPC. So say you're playing a game like The Witcher 3, they would want to put it so you can basically walk up to any NPC in the world, even somebody like tilling the field out, you know, on the farm. And you can walk up to them with your microphone and say, hey, I'm looking for Yennefer. Have you seen her? And they'll respond, right? This is not the first time they've tried to do something like this, but basically what happened is that Ubisoft has built out a prototype of what this would actually look like, and they showed it off to some people at GDC, which is the Game Developer Conference. It's where they tend to share a lot of their coolest discoveries as they work on these things in prototype phases. And as they say, the company calls the project its first player-facing generative AI prototype that could transform the way players interact with non-playable characters, or NPCs, in video games and open new frontiers for gameplay that natively integrates generative AI features. This is something like NVIDIA has shown off in tech demos with that one in the like ramen shop that we've all probably seen by now. And again, the idea is just to have it so you can talk to NPCs freely. There are no more dialogue options, no more dialogue choices or anything. They can build it out so that you talk to an NPC just like you're talking to any other human being, and they should be able to respond in a somewhat realistic way. Now, I've said that this sounds really cool, right? This is a cool concept for gameplay, but let's be perfectly honest, okay? Let's just call it like we see it. Part of the benefit of this is that if they tie this into, say, something like ChatGPT or some other large language model that needs an online connection to work, guess what? Every single player game that requires this tech will have to always be online. Every single one, right? They could theoretically like build in a language model that works natively on like a console. They could technically maybe have it so like this feature is only supported if you toggle it on. Otherwise, it's just regular dialogue options. They could do something like that. And I would imagine that the first few iterations of this that we see are going to work like that, where it's going to be like a cool bonus feature you can use if you want, but you don't have to. But I think eventually this will be a great opportunity for the executives to force you to have games always online. And the reason they like that is, for one, it pretty much negates piracy in a lot of instances, especially something like this where you have to have verified tokens that can be redeemed with OpenAI or whatever other platform you're using for this type of generative AI stuff. So for executives, they love the concept of always online content. One of the other things is that this will require in order to use ChatGPT or OpenAI stuff, you have to access the API and you have to access it using tokens. And these tokens you can buy in bulk, and they're not crazy expensive, but basically the idea is that if you submit a bunch of text to ChatGPT, that requires them to process it on their server farms, and that can take a while, and that takes energy and power and everything. So they charge you for that. Something like this, their goal would also be to charge companies like Ubisoft for the service as well. So you could see this only come to like big MMOs where you're paying a monthly subscription fee, and part of that subscription fee pays for the processing of this stuff. You could also see it where it's like an upgrade. So it's like, ooh, Assassin's Creed, whatever, World War II. And if you want the free open discourse with NPCs, it's an added charge. You have to pay an extra $10 a month in order to freely talk with NPCs. And it's like the AI subscription or whatever. They'd have to probably do something like that. I know there's talk for next gen consoles where they're going to try to have processing centers and like neural network engines and stuff native to the consoles, actually on the consoles. So you could do all the processing natively. If that happens, awesome. But based on my latest reading, like even Apple for the next iPhone, which is like even for the pros, over $1,000 device, they aren't even able to get full like large language learning models or whatever working on the iPhone. So they're still relying on cloud services, and they're expected to partner with like OpenAI or somebody to do the big processing for more complex tasks and stuff. So we'll eventually get there probably, but you better believe if executives can find a way to charge you out the ass every step of the way for something like this, a cool feature, they're probably going to do that. But let's see what exactly it is. According to Ubisoft's news post, these NPCs are created not by a machine, but by a human writer who shapes their character, backstories, and conversation style, and then continues to tweak once the learning language model starts improvising dialogue. In a private demo at GDC, Ubisoft showed invited press several demos in which players would interact with the AI-powered characters using voice commands, reports gamesindustry.biz. They first challenged players, I'm guessing, to build a relationship with an NPC called Bloom, who would respond to questions and react depending on the tone of their voice. So allegedly it can even detect tone and emotion. So if you're angry and you're yelling at an NPC, or if you're quiet or you're trying to be sexy, I don't know, it could technically, I guess, try to recognize that. Interesting. Players were then encouraged to learn about his backstory and other characters. Okay. If the right questions are asked, it will trigger scripted information relevant to the game, and building a relationship would allow the player to level up their link with the character via an on-screen meter, which unlocks more behaviors. In a second demo, Bloom watched a stealth mission with a drone reacting to what was happening in the mission, responding to questions from the player, and showing awareness of progress and his surroundings. Interesting. A third demo featured an NPC called Iron during a mission planning stage. Seriously, did they just pick like the weirdest, most like... I've never met somebody named Iron or Bloom, you know, whatever. Moving on. Iron suggested ways to approach the infiltration of a building, and players were encouraged to challenge her ideas, which would cause her to comment on whether she believed the players' ideas would work. According to Ubisoft, the objective of the demo is to enhance narrative immersion and provide a glimpse at the numerous roles advanced NPCs could take within games. Neo NPCs are the result of an R&D initiative led by a team at Ubisoft's Paris studio and supported by Ubisoft's Production Technology Department. Ubisoft also collaborated with NVIDIA and In-World AI. In-World AI's character engine and LLM technology enable Ubisoft's narrative team to build a complete background, knowledge base, and conversational style for each NPC, while NVIDIA Audio to Face, part of NVIDIA ACE suite of technologies, is used to enable real-time facial animation. It could be the start of a fantastic paradigm shift. Xavier Manzanares, director and producer of the project, said, for the first time, the game world actually listens to and dynamically responds to players. Social interactions and skills become part of the gameplay. Smarter NPCs like our Neo NPCs have the potential to become a breakthrough addition to the traditional NPCs we see in games today. They provide the ability to create even more immersive worlds and emergent stories. Interesting. And this is followed up by news that according to a survey conducted by Unity, almost 2/3 of game development studios are now using AI as part of their workflows. But this was very vague. It wasn't clear if this was stuff like this or if it was something more like, oh, you're using ChatGPT to respond to customer emails. It wasn't super clear. But anyway, with all of this, it's a cool thing. And I do think that eventually we get this in most games. I've been saying for years, you guys can go back to like videos I did in 2019, 2018. I probably was saying around the time of Red Dead 2. I think the next frontier of video game development and advancement is AI. And I've thought that for a while because like I just don't see ray tracing as that exciting. I don't think people are going to be like, wow, ray tracing really improved the games industry completely. I just don't see it. I think rather AI, which is much more tangible to the player experience, is going to lead to much bigger advancements than anything else, much more noticeable ones. And so I think it makes sense that we're seeing this push. And beyond that, there are business reasons why it makes sense for companies to push it. Because again, if they can force games always online with a gameplay reason, then they kind of are free of the obligation of that. I think that's unfortunate because it probably leads to situations where not only do games get shut down when they're no longer supported, but it also leads to situations where people who are not swimming in money literally can't afford to play the latest and greatest open world, adventure games or RPGs. Speaking to players, it'll be, I think, potentially damaging because you'll have two classes of players: the players that get the game and just play it, and then the players who get the game and can afford for the premium experience of higher end NPCs. But maybe they find a way to do all of this processing natively on the device. Maybe they find a way to do that. That would be my hope. Maybe we get that with next gen consoles. Maybe we get that with even the PS5 Pro, though that's unlikely. We'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But still, it's an interesting development. At least it's something different and new. And I think that this would actually feel notably different compared to the things we've gotten recently, where it's like, ooh, we have DLSS or FSR2 on our game now. That's the biggest advancement we have. And so now, yes, it runs at 540p, but it upscales so it looks like a blurry 4K. You're welcome. Now, this could actually lead to a situation where it's a technological leap that feels significantly differently, and it will actually affect gameplay in a noticeable way, which would be, I think, cool. Let's see, Vinyl. This feels like it'll become a niche gimmick in indie and AAA games, but will become a horrific plague upon large game companies as suits want to use this to cut costs rather than enhancing experiences. Well, and that's kind of the big question mark with this, is that AI stuff is a tool, right? Tools can either be used to create even more impressive works of art, or they can be relied upon to remove the artistry from whatever you're discussing. Like, you go back and you look at some of the things that the ancient Egyptians crafted with nothing but copper chisels and hammers. The hammers weren't made of copper, but you get what I'm saying. Copper chisels and wood hammers. And they were amazing works of artistry and craftsmanship, stunning. And those tools were not that advanced. Don't you dare, and I swear to God, if somebody goes, well, actually it was aliens, I swear to God, banned right away. But the moment we get like these power tools, it should be easier to make those works of art. But we don't see as many, right? Tools you would hope would just enable you to make even more impressive and crazier works of art. But often they can be treated as a crutch to make creating those things easier and more streamlined, so it's less impressive when it does happen. And I fear, just like you're saying, Vinyl, I fear similar things where you could see Ubisoft and other big studios relying on these AI tools to bypass what was traditionally done by like world artists or the narrative team writing out scripts for NPCs and working with voice actors and actresses to create experiences to talk to players and things. All of that could go out the window if AI is just going to handle all of it. And while I think AI is an incredibly powerful tool and could certainly lead to very impressive experiences, kind of like these demos are projecting, that like, oh, you'll have actual people basically in games that respond and have personalities and actually can talk and discuss with you. That could lead to some crazy instances. Like, imagine playing a game like Uncharted, but you're playing as Nathan Drake, and you can just have a conversation with Elena as you're exploring, or with Sam as you're exploring and climbing around ruins and stuff. You could actually talk to him about his background. You could ask him questions and interrogate him a little. There's all sorts of crazy things that could happen, and you could build crazy cool relationships that are super robust compared to what you would traditionally get in a video game by doing something like that. But that might not actually lead to a better overall game, and it could harm the industry if the industry starts to rely on that too much, which, as we've seen with pretty much every technological leap in the last 20 years, in the gaming space especially, whenever a leap is made, companies start to rely on it, and other things seemingly suffer as a result. We get ray tracing, that's awesome. Now the game can look and run like garbage, but if it has ray tracing, it's supposed to be okay. Now that we have FSR and DLSS and all these upscaling techs, it's like, okay, well, we'll just turn those on and optimization can take a backseat. Like, who cares? It'll run like crap, yeah, but it has DLSS, so it technically is getting to this frame rate target. Yes, it looks super blurry and it's super kind of crappy, but still, we technically hit it with those bells and whistles we added. So my hope is that this is a tool used in clever and creative ways, but let's be perfectly honest. I see this more likely being used as sort of a scapegoat for executives to force games always online, to potentially introduce monthly subscriptions into single player games. And, you know, I think if you look at the application of a technology like this within Ubisoft itself, it's probably something where it's like, you want to play the latest Assassin's Creed game through Assassin's Creed Infinity, their new hub they're going to have. Cool. If you want the cool generative AI feature to be able to talk to NPCs freely, that's an extra $15 a month or $20 a month. And it applies to all of your Assassin's Creed games under Assassin's Creed Infinity, but you have to pay that extra monthly fee. I think that's what they do. I think that's more likely it. So while it's a cool technology, I agree. I'll believe it when I see it applied in a really novel and pro-consumer way, because most likely, I think at this point I would put more money on it being used to milk players for more cash money. That's my guess.
He took my thing.